One of the things that is so interesting about the moment we're in with all of this is like, the whole terms like left versus right came out of the French Revolution. It was like, oh, if you were on the left, you were like the Jacobins and like the anti-monarchists. And if you were on the right, you were sort of with the aristocracy and the monarchy. But today it's sort of like the Trump team would be the left. Like they're the closest thing to an insurgent that's trying to take on the entrenched interests. And what we've called the left seem to be in favor of all the things that that Walmart does on Twitter. It's like there's all the same. So has the left and right just completely reversed, or is left and right just stupid and doesn't even make any sense in our politics now to even think in terms of left and right?
I think it's confusing to try to think in terms of left and right. Just like I laid out at the beginning of this show, was that the things that the left is supposed to be traditionally about, they're not, right? And the Democratic Party is now beholden to Wall Street. And as my friend Russell Dobular says, if you're a left party that's in bed with Wall Street, there's no point to you, which is why they have to push identity politics, because that's all they have left. And identity politics doesn't come from the bottom up. It comes from the top down. And why? As Christian Parenti explained to me on my show, son of Michael Parenti, they've been doing this since World War II. It's the NGOs like the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, work hand in hand with the deep state to make sure that social movements don't have an economic component to them, right? So so that's why they push identity politics. That's why the deep state pushed feminism. Yeah. What's her name? The big feminist. Now I'm blanking on her name. Doesn't matter.
Jane Fonda.
No,
I guess
Gloria Steinem.
Oh, right.
Said she was at CIA, and so that's the game. The game is that that's when did they kill Martin Luther King? Not when he was desegregating lunch counters, because that makes everybody money, but it was when he was doing a poor people's march, when he turned against the Vietnam War, and he wasn't doing a poor black people's march. He was doing a poor people's march. Same thing with Malcolm X. When he realized that it wasn't a black-white thing, that's when they got rid of him. So that's what it's always those. That's where identity politics comes from. They want you to identify with your sexuality. They want the most important thing about you to be your skin color or your ethnicity or your race, and that's a mistake. And that's there to make sure people don't come together and divide people. And it comes from people like BlackRock. There's videos I've showed of Larry Fink saying we have to force DEI on corporations. We have to force it on them, and that's coming from the top down. And that's to keep the workers divided, and so they don't come together So it's not. You're right. It's not left right. It's the top down. It's us against them. It's workers against the oligarchs. And that's what I say at the end of my show, my stand-up show. You know, it isn't left right anymore, because people can't tell me what left right means anymore. So you got RFK Jr. in there going after corruption in the FDA and the CDC and going to clean up the food supplies, go after big agra. You got Trump and stopping a war and wanting to make friends with Russia and China, and floating the idea of cutting our military by 50%.
That was the biggest overlooked statement in the past several weeks. It was sort of shocking that this was said
by the president
in the Oval Office.
That sounds like something that you would think Bernie Sanders would say. Of course, he would never say it, because he's also afraid of the military-industrial complex and the deep state, and he does their bidding. And so, but there it is. And so that's why, it does. So, RFK said that there's been, he knows more about this than me, but there's been 4 different political realignments in our nation's history politically. He said we're in the middle of one, and there's certainly something's happening. Glenn Greenwald talks about a realignment, and that and then the people who don't see it are the dumbest people around. And I'm like, well, I do see that. Donald. When you see how hard the establishment was against Donald Trump, and how hard the establishment was against Tulsi Gabbard, and how hard they were against Kash Patel, and how hard they were in unison. Never Trumper Republicans and all the Democrats and the media, and they're against RFK. They're like, oh, well, that how could you? There's got to be something good about them, at the very least. If it's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? So,
well, especially when it's such a diverse group, like it's not like it's an ideological monoculture in that group. You're talking about like a wide range of views in just the people you just listed.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so. That's my message. My message is it's not left right anymore. It's us against them. It's populists against oligarchy, and Trump is. There's again a lot of things I disagree with him on, and I hope he doesn't cut Medicare. I hope his cuts to Medicaid make sense, and they don't take a meat cleaver to it, as Steve Bannon said. And I hope he lives up to his promises about protecting Medicare and Social Security, and not taxing Social Security. I mean, all those things. Like he's not going to tax tipped wages. He's not going to tax overtime. He's going to protect Social Security. I mean, he sounds like a progressive lefty a lot of times. I mean, Joe Biden. Remember Joe Biden ran on the public option, and then they never brought it up again. That was it.
It was actually really shocking to me that healthcare, like the healthcare system, played no role in our politics in the aftermath of a pandemic that basically introduced like communist totalitarianism in America.
Yeah,
and it was not talked about until the CEO of United Healthcare got shot.
That's right,
and only briefly, except in like
and then you're not supposed to. Shouldn't be celebrating this. I'm like, I already bought a float, but
I'm not saying I supported that, but I mean, it is interesting that did bring the conversation in. It's actually it's tragic that that's what it took to bring the conversation even temporarily back.
It was very temporary. It's over.